open the meeting. And let me start by this introduction. This session is being auto-recorded, just like every other P&Z meeting. Please be advised that today we are also recording the video as well. Commissioners and staff will generally remain on mute except when speaking or voting, and will keep video of themselves on throughout the meeting. During public hearings, of which we have several tonight, all normal rules, including stating and spelling your name, apply. Please use the chat feature or raise your hand to speak, and you will be recognized. So, moving on to roll call, we have David and Adam and Karen just joined us. We have Dwight, we have who else do we have?
Alice is now coming in.
Okay, we have Alice and we have Daryl. So we have a full commission. Why don't we start by the reading and approval of the minutes of the regular meeting, February 10th, 2022. Any comments on the meeting minutes?
I would, I do have a comment, Wes. I would say on page 4 in the last paragraph.
Okay.
In the 1, 2, 3, end of the 4th into the 5th line, we're talking about daycare, and it's a comment that I made that he looked at daycare in the regulations, and it is not permitted anywhere within the rural zone, anywhere else within the rural zone. I believe that I said that I looked at daycare related terms in the regulation, and group daycare homes were not permitted in the rural zone.
Okay, Donna, you've got, I was not present at that one.
I remember that, like that also.
Do we hear any other comments on the meeting minutes? If not, a motion to approve as amended.
Make that motion that we approve the regularly scheduled minutes from February.
I will second that motion.
All in favor signify by raising your hand. Motion carried. Okay, public communications. I would like to suggest that that we move 6B2 and 6B3 to the top of the public hearing, to the top of new business. If no one has an objection to that.
What, 6B2 and 6B3?
That is the site plan, for Kent Center. And there's a Horizon Line application.
I'll make that motion.
And I will second it.
All in favor? Okay, so we will hear those two right before 6A1. Okay, so are there any other public communications that anyone might have tonight? So hearing none, why don't we get right into the public hearings? Actually, the first item is a discussion. 5B1, clarification on baseline of operations and aspirations of Club Getaway. So before we get knee deep in new definitions, first, I believe we should use tonight's meeting to put on our planning hats. In trying to fix a single conformity, we should discuss the probable consequence of adding regulation which would apply to the whole of Kent. Currently, zoning does not allow a rural resort and conference center use. The commission should agree whether this use is appropriate for Kent and in accordance with the POCD. I submit that it may not, and I would welcome discussions on this, but I think that we should discuss ramifications before we get into any regulations that we apply our planning hat. So any discussion, Adam?
So I am a little concerned about as I read the definition and what what Attorney Miriam wrote, which I thought was really very, very good, but it's so broad. And my concern is that accepting something like this or bringing something in is a Pandora's box. It creates some definition for us for Club Getaway, but it opens up the entire rural zone to the possibility of a resort, and I don't think that that's our intent, and I think we have to be very careful about how we move forward on that.
Just a point of clarity, if we leave it as non-conforming, is the implication then that they're frozen effectively? They can do exactly what they're doing and that they would not be able to make any change or modification whatsoever because there's no legal way for them to do that. They're grandfathered as is, and there's no special permit applying to them now.
Well, I would think so. They've been doing it for 50 years.
Right, but if you want to do something new or change anything, there's no mechanism to do that, which is sort of why I thought we were embarking on the
That's
effort
true.
to bring them.
When we first started this discussion, it was my understanding that we were simply trying to establish a baseline of their operations, not an operations of a club. So it got, I believe, beyond where I think we should go with this. That's why I raised this as a discussion.
I just want to understand the context of what it means if we decide we don't want to come up with a means to regulate them under our existing regulations. If it just means they just continue on as is, maybe that's okay. But then if they want to do something new, or they need to change something, or we have an issue comes up, if we don't have any framework to deal with it other than to look at kind of the historical record.
Well,
No, they would go to ZBA because they would be pre-existing non-conforming. So anything that they would need to do, they would need to get a variance for. That's my understanding.
that they would do anything differently than they do now. Is that what you mean, Donna?
Well, they would have to change the permit or they would have to change what they've been approved to do up to now. If they want to change that, then they would need to get a variance because they're pre-existing non-conforming. And then when going there, they would need to prove their hardship.
Right. Well, we have a pretty good record and have a pretty good memory of what Club Getaway has been about for the last, at least I do, for the last 30 years. So there's somewhat of a baseline that we know about. And that was what I thought we were going to try to pursue. Just a written baseline um, um, that establishes who they are and what they do.
Without tying that back to any kind of permitted use, that this is their pre-existing, and this is what they do. So we have somewhat of a description, Wes, of what they're doing now, and anything different, they would have to, as Donna said, go to ZBA or pursue some different avenue.
Well, that's really the issue that is for discussion now. That by doing something, by defining them in our regulation, we open the all of Kent to this. We're writing a regulation. I'm just worried about the consequence of what this regulation might mean. That's my personal concern.
I don't think that right now you're not writing a regulation. Now what you're writing is just a definition. And then I think when you start to write the regulation that will be under the special permitted use, then you can flesh out the specifics and assign different conditions under which approval would be given, such as acreage, you know, a certain amount of frontage. I don't know, you know, I mean, you would go into it, you would go into it that way. So that
True.
if somebody else that's within the rural district has said, well, you know what, I want to become a resort, they would still need to meet the criteria of the special permit.
That's true, but it opens the door.
It does open the door. I think
Absolutely opens the door.
yeah.
And we go from, and to Wes's point, we go from simply defining what Club Getaway is doing to making it allowable in whatever zone, wherever this new regulation is allowed. So we go from simply saying, this is what Club Getaway is doing. We understand what they're doing, and we can, well, we understand what they're doing. Two, this is what Club Getaway is doing. We're codifying this in our regulations, and then allowing, as Wes is concerned with, allowing somebody else to come in and do it within the parameters that we set within the regulations.
Right. Which we have done for 30 or 40 years.
In the first instance, yeah.
I don't remember our previous POCD saying much about this sort of activity as being desired or undesired. Has it come up in the conversations about the new POCD? Is there some reason that the idea of having the option for another resort of this type in Kent would be anathema to Kent as a whole?
Well, I mean, let's face it. It's an asset. Kent has the asset for this. Is it necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. But I think that's a planning item that should be discussed.
And I think that's true. It hasn't come up. Club Getaway, and that use hasn't come up in our discussions regarding the plan of conservation and development rewrite, except for certain specific instances with sewer connections. But I think Wes and Adam have brought up this concern as to whether we think this is an appropriate use for any zone in Kent, and I think that Wes may be right, that before we start crafting a regulation which allows this use, we should decide as a community whether this use should be permitted. That seems to make sense.
Our not doing anything doesn't prevent Club Getaway from continuing their operation. And I don't think anybody wants to stop them or get in their way. We like Club Getaway. But I do think it is, we have to be really wary before once we create a regulation, then we allow it anywhere. And there's a lot of places where somebody could all of a sudden decide they want to put a resort
Well, it's not anywhere. It's anywhere in the rural district.
in the rural district.
Right.
They're not going to do it downtown, so it's but there's a lot of,
They could
we
try.
have a lot of rural district.
Yeah, no, 98% is
Yeah.
the rural district.
But the point had, the point from the very beginning was to give ourselves an understanding, was to have, was to work with Club Getaway and David and try to come up with an understanding of what they're about and what they're doing. And as Wes said, you know, which we've got some institutional knowledge here on the commission as to what Club Getaway is about and what they do and what they maybe shouldn't be doing. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say shouldn't be doing, but haven't done in the past. So we were really looking to get, as Wes said earlier, a baseline. So how do we get that baseline if we're not going to create a regulation? So we've somewhat gone down the road of leaning towards creating this regulation in order to establish a baseline, because we couldn't come up with maybe a better solution up until now. But if there's a concern about adding this to the regulation without some real serious thought and community involvement, then we have to go back and try to figure out how we can establish that baseline without a regulation.
Well, I mean, you can put the definition that had been in the regulations previously, which was club. And during the rewrite, for some reason or another, that definition had gotten dropped. And that was one of the reasons why we ended up going down this path. That was one of the reasons why. So if you want to just put that definition back, then he would not be pre-existing non-conforming. And we would use the baseline from the information that he provided before this new definition was created.
How would we not, he'd be non-conforming, there's no regulation for him, even when we put the definition back in. It's still not an allowed use.
Yeah, I agree with that, David. You have to not only have a definition, but you have to have it as an allowed use, a permitted use.
I don't know if the use had been deleted or not.
Yeah, but if we put the use back in, it just, I mean, that opens the exact can of worms that Wes and Adam are referring to. I don't know if it was realistic to expect that we'd suddenly have an inrush of resorts appearing, particularly once we thought about how we might want to restrict it. But I guess how would, I mean, I want to say we'd kick this to the PUCD to gather input, but since we are actively rewriting it, would it make sense to still leverage that process? And in one of the community forums, see if there is an interest in supporting this as a general use? Or would we want to do something completely independent at another meeting here?
Well, I think that we should really be afforded that protection as to what we're doing to have it included in the POCD, and which is accepted by the town.
Happy to bring that back to the planner, and talk maybe Donna and I can talk to Glenn about what we're talking about here. With certainly with the input of Karen and Adam.
It does seem like lower density rural recreation seems to be in line with a lot of
And Mark.
other things in the town. But yeah, it'd be nice to get some feedback and formalizing that, certainly.
Listen, it's not necessarily such a bad thing. I'm not really speaking against the use, because I've enjoyed Club Getaway myself many times. It's a great spot. But there are other places that this could definitely happen in Kent.
Really, I've just expressed my concern that we could be opening a Pandora's box and that everybody we need to think about that and discuss that before we just look at making a use, because there can be ramification that maybe we didn't intend.
Daryl, what do you think?
Well, we've attempted to establish baselines in the past, and I think each iteration has been stronger. So it seemed like, moving to a definition was a natural course. Then, of course, a definition is tied to regulation. So if we want to interrupt that flow, obviously now's the time. I wouldn't be willing to say that this would be inappropriate on every parcel in town. We have, some pretty intensive activities in the rural zone that, sometimes work fine. We have private schools, we have camps, we have treatment facilities. So it's not unheard of for an operation to, a unique operation to be able to be successful on the right parcel. I figured that in crafting any regulation, the conditions that we would put on an operation like this would be fairly limiting in terms of where it might happen. But I'm happy to solve the near-term issue with Club Getaway and put more thought into the ramifications. But I wouldn't say right now that it's completely inappropriate everywhere forever.
Karen, how about you?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I tend to agree with you, Wes. I think we should go slowly and cautiously with this. In my opinion, I think, Club Getaway fits perfectly into our regulations, the way it's operating, has been operating for the last, like you say, 50 years. I personally don't see any reason to change that. I guess we're looking to establish the so-called baseline. But I don't think we should be in any hurry, and I don't know. I need more time to really think about it, I guess. Sorry.
Alice, can you hear us? Yeah,
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
you sure can.
I have a question. Like Karen, I hadn't really thought about it in these terms. I thought a lot about all these new terms for it, a resort and things like that, when we always referred to it as Club Getaway, and we knew what we were talking about. When the ownership changed, when David came, were there any issues, do I recall, or am I, any change in what was going on there that could have triggered a discussion of this sort at that time? Does my question make sense? I don't know. I've got the feeling some changes occurred, but nothing that came to our attention in terms of regulating, the zoning area. So, let's say David doesn't stay there and somebody else comes in. Is there any control over what happens there under different management? That's another thing that concerns me about not having definition. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, to not address it leaves us open anyway. So we somehow got to address it for the use of this permit, this land, this property versus whatever other options may come up. So maybe this is a much bigger subject than whether we call it a resort or a club.
I guess I would also point out, we do have a member of the community, David, coming to us sort of at our behest to try and, craft regulation for it. And I'm sure Mr. Merriam's not working for free on it. So I wouldn't want to
Right.
force them to invest any extra time and energy in something if we're suddenly going to pause it also.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be pleased to speak to some of these issues if you wish me to at some point.
Perhaps, but we did want to, I think, use this time with the board to
Understood.
discuss a planning issue in Kent, not necessarily a zoning issue in Kent.
I have another question, Wes, just really quickly. What is the owner's goal? Why is he feeling that there needs to be a better definition or a changed regulation? Somehow I don't have that answer in my head, if you do.
So Karen, that came up because when they had the all weekend extravaganza, and we had to give them a special event permit, and so it came from me while I was chairman to try to figure out how we could define what they were doing, so we understood what Club Getaway was about, and that use could be somewhat contained, because we didn't have any regulation to support it, and we didn't have any definition or really anything that we could lean on to say what you're doing, what's, that use really was a little bit too intense, and then David, I don't mean to say, I don't want to rehash that whole that thing, and I know that I think we're in some accord with that, but that it came out of that we wanted to sort of codify what they were doing.
Okay. Thank you.
Wes, I don't have the same history that I think almost everyone else does here. I've only been here 7 years, which makes me kind of a baby in some respects. To a certain extent, it seems like the horse has already left the barn. Like, we have a rural resort, and we all seem to be pleased that we have one, but we just want to have only one. And I don't know how that would fall into a zoning regulation, because it does seem to be defining it that we're okay to have one of these things, we're not okay to have any more, and we're okay to leave it non-conforming. And if somebody else with a similar property were to come before us and say, hey, you're letting that other one run in a non-conforming fashion, you all seem pretty happy with it, why wouldn't I be able to start one? That's not the me-I, that's some other random person that might show up. So we're obviously, with our planning hats on, or at least with our zoning hats on, we're all okay to have a Club Getaway operating. So the planning question is sort of like, I think it's challenging to say that we are not okay with the use, because we clearly are okay with the use. The question is why we might not be okay with two of those uses if it were to happen, just listening to the comments of everybody in history. So I find it difficult to say we sort of are not already sort of in favor of it. And maybe if we want to formalize that with some sort of public, with the public hearing and the public input, which I think we'd have anyway, or having that come from the POCD, I think that would certainly help clarify it from my perspective why we might not be okay with the use. But then we should be not okay with it and leaving it as grandfathered in, because we don't think we should have that use in the rural zone.
David, I think that's a fair summary of task at hand. Yeah.
So I know we're going to be talking about the progress on the POCD, and we're hopefully going to be setting a meeting for the commission to talk about our progress on the POCD. Does it make sense to maybe table this discussion until we go back and talk to our planner, have him come up with some, just think about it and maybe present some ideas at that special meeting that we have to discuss the progress on the plan of conservation and development?
I think that's a good idea, and I think we should provide them with the material that Attorney Miriam wrote.
All with the understanding that that Club Getaway, that David will continue to that he'll continue to use that property as he has done in the past. So nothing that we're saying tonight is it should give David any indication, and this is just a question. I'm posing this as a as a discussion, that none of this conversation should give David any pause that he is still allowed to continue to operate as he's been operating in the past. And I know that's, so we're sort of nebulous, and that's what we're trying to sort of tighten up, but that's what we're saying.
I believe
Well,
that.
what-
Yeah.
Just another context, you know, when you talk about rural Kent and POCD and all this, we've always been very proud of the history of camps in the town of Kent. And should this somehow, Club Getaway, be incorporated in that genre? Or could it be? And I don't know the answer to this. This is simply a question I'm posing as to how to handle this problem or this issue, this potential issue, that it falls into the camps. As we think of kids going and sleeping in tents, you know.
If I remember right, we did discuss that at one point, you know, and how we could work out. The problem is what
Right.
Club Getaway doesn't work with our definition and our regulation for what a camp is.
Right.
Because it really is a resort, and I think we all support Club Getaway, and we like what they do, and I don't want to stand in the way of Club Getaway. I'm just wary about a regulation, or I want us to have really good discussion about it, so everyone goes into this with their eyes wide open.
With the POCD, if it included such a blessing, gives our commission at least cover for what we're doing here. If not, then and it is open to places we might think back on.
We would have a public hearing though, right, for any potential new regulation?
Of course,
Yeah.
well, of course, but the gates open. I mean, we don't oftentimes deny projects.
True, but I think the denial would be an expression that the town doesn't want resorts, so we wouldn't craft regulation, and that would put Club Getaway where it is now, a non-conforming use with limited.
A denial would be based strictly on the regulations, not
Correct.
on, right.
Yeah, but I'm saying if we had a special, if we were crafting regulation for a rural resort, and ultimately the feedback was extremely negative, the town should not have more rural resorts, then we wouldn't add the regulation. And then I guess the limbo would continue, but we would know.
I heard Matt mention that that we table this to a meeting with the POCD. Do I hear that motion?
I'll make that motion.
No,
Sorry, Alice.
it's okay.
Second, anybody?
I'll second the motion. I think it's a good idea to go back to the POCD.
Any further discussion? All in favor of that, raise your hand. Okay, motion carried. So Dwight and David, this does not in any way affect what you're doing with your operation, and this was never the intent. But I think we have to be cautious in what we're doing.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just to follow up on this topic, I don't know whether or not everybody saw the chat, but Rufus Duran commented that Club Getaway began as a camp, but evolved in order to stay financially viable. So I just
Right.
wanted to let everybody, in case they did not see that.
I'm sorry, Donna, what was that?
Rufus,
Yeah,
oh, now I don't know where it went. But he said that that Club Getaway had started as a camp, and evolved to stay financially stable.
right.
Well, Donna, that's why I brought up the whole subject of doesn't it belong in the genre of camps? It still is. Anyway, that's.
I think I'd like to also send an email to Mike and just ask Mike, what are the ramifications of leaving this without any kind of category? And, you know, what does that really mean? From his
That
point
would
of view.
be, that would be excellent, and perhaps you could then put that in the agenda for next, or the review of those comments in the agenda for next meeting.
Okay. Will do.
Okay, 5B2 is High Watch. I understand that they have withdrawn. Is that correct, Donna? The application?
Yeah, I received a letter on March 3rd from Jason Perillo, who is the Vice President of Communications and the Chief Marketing Officer, that said, at this juncture, High Watch Recovery Center, Inc., High Watch, is reassessing the request and the permitting process concerning this matter. Therefore, High Watch respectfully withdraws the above referenced request without prejudice. We thank you and the commission for your consideration. So I just need someone to make a motion to accept the withdrawal of the modification request.
I'll make
So
that
moved.
motion.
Then I will second it.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor, raise your hand. Motion carried on.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. We had moved 6B2 to the front of that line. And that is a, no, that's not a public hearing. So,
No, none of
Yeah.
them are.
right, exactly.
So Wes,
Right.
I'm gonna recuse myself for this this
Okay.
sign, the alternative signage discussion. So I'll
Yeah.
jump back on when you guys are through.
Okay, great. So is anyone here to review that?
I believe Carol Corey is here. So you need to unmute yourself, Carol. Thank you. Basically, this is a modification to the site plan application based on the alternative signage program for the Kent Center LLC, which is located at 9 Maple Street. This one particular sign application is going on building that's also known as 6 North Main Street, which I believe is where the management offices are. They're upstairs, and I think Carol's going to be downstairs. So you can see that building if you're looking down the entrance in between the old B. Johnstone's, where the bookstore used to be. And I think now it's the country store and Wilson. So if you look down there, would be the building on the right-hand side. And there was a gallery already in there. And this is just Carol Corey moving from her original location into that building with the signage.
Donna, these signs are just replacing the 2 signs that said Ober Gallery before. There's
Right.
really just a change of name in the same
Right.
place.
Yep, she will be putting another sign on the building that faces Fuller Lane. And that is identified as image number 3. So it's not just a blank facade, there would be actually a sign on that, 10 inches high by 60 inches wide.
My office is right across from that, and I had never seen that as an entrance to the Uber Gallery. So that would be good.
That's why I want to have a sign there.
All right.
There was a letter in your packets from Lee Garofalo, who is the Chief Administrative Officer of the Kent Barns, agreeing with the modification to the site plan.
So I'll just go ahead and make a motion that to accept modification to site plan application 62-15C.
Second,
Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion carried. Thanks so much, Carol.
Right, I'll sign off then. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
And then the Horizon Line application. Kent Greenhouse.
I'm going to recuse myself.
Thanks, Daryl. Is there anyone here to present that?
I think Chris Elko is here.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
So this is the proposal to put in an in-ground pool at an existing house. That house is located at the end of Fuller. I don't know if anybody knows Mike Profita, but this is Mike Profita's old house. So you go up this very long and very, very windy driveway. I went up that driveway once and I thought my car was going to flip over on its roof. I don't even know how they go up and down it. Anyway, they are proposing the construction of a pool. You can see on the site plan that there is a large piece of this property is in the Horizon Line. It does go up quite steeply in the back. This was probably the flattest area in which a house could be built and consequently a pool. It is, I do not believe that there are any trees in the area at this point in time. So they're not going to be cutting down any trees. The only concern that you might want to check with them on is lighting. I don't know what kind of lighting they're going to have on there because that lighting will definitely be seen from the other side.
I believe the application states that there's no lighting. Is that? did I
Correct,
read-
yeah, there's no lighting except for inside the pool. So there'll be 3 lights there, I think 3 or 4 lights in the pool, which actually will probably be facing away from the horizon line, but I don't think you would see it with the ground plane. I can share my screen and show a picture of the spot where the pool is proposed if that helps anyone.
So any lighting on the terrace might be by landscape type lighting down facing.
Correct. The only thing potentially would be there's the retaining wall, which is along the behind the pool. We might put under cap lights. That would be the extent of the lighting at most. So that would be 18 inches above the pool terrace, which is, set back pretty far from the edge.
you
So
said you have a
where's the-
photo? Oh,
I do.
Go ahead,
So
David.
I just wasn't sure if you wanted me to share the screen or not. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Sure.
So this is the area, this is the flat lawn, this is the outside stake of the pool, back to here and then up across this area. There'll be a small retaining wall set back, which will actually cut into the hillside a little bit. So and then the lawn is just graded out. We're not adding any trees as of now, anywhere in front because they want to keep the view open. But I don't think you would actually see this from Route 7.
That was helpful. Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Well,
Well, it
since-
really is a scar, the house there, it really is a scar on the hillside. So you see the house no matter what, from, driving down Route 7. I mean, it's.
Right, the house you do see, yes.
You see it in the winter, you see it in the summer. So you've answered the one question that I have with regard to the downhill slope of the pool, that there's not going to be any change in grading there, which is, it's not really clear from the site plan. There's really no grading plan here.
No, there's no grading plan. I mean, we might grade a little bit on the lawn just to blend it out, but the idea is the pool will go right into the lawn on the downhill side. And the terrace is all on the uphill side or back set against the hill.
Is the fence going to be opaque? Or is it like a chain fence or something?
It would be a black vinyl fence to meet pool code, so it disappears pretty much if you're up against it, in the yard. So I don't think you would see that. And there actually, because of the slope there, it'll be the background of the fence will actually be the slope, so there won't be any. You wouldn't see through it or see it visible.
So if you're sitting in the pool, you'd be able to look down to Route 7. Is that the goal? I mean, not to look at Route 7, but to look down in the valley.
Yes, to the hills across. That's the idea. You could do that. I mean, you can pretty much do that now across. They have a terrace basically next to where the pool's going. So.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chris, you said the lighting on that retaining wall in the back, that small retaining wall in the back is going to be what?
So there's a very thin LED light that fits underneath the flagstone cap. So you have a 2-inch flagstone cap, then a 6-inch wide light underneath it that is facing down. So it really just lights right underneath it on the terrace. So it's a very light ambient color.
So it's down facing from the underside of the cap?
Correct.
Or it's below the cap and it's got a shroud that causes it to down face?
The latter. It's below the cap. It's got a shroud in front, and then it shines down, so it doesn't shine out.
The application specifically states no lights other than underwater in the pool.
This is just a discussion I had today with the client as an option. If you say no, she'll say no. So just being open, because I just had the discussion.
Hey, Donna, when was were the horizon line regulations written after this house was built?
I'm not sure. I am not sure.
You know who would know?
Who would know?
Daryl.
Oh.
Anyway,
Well, it doesn't.
I had that discussion, so my understanding is it was built before the regulation, but
it wouldn't make any difference anyway, because like if you're looking at a lot up in St. John's Peak, the lots themselves were created before the horizon line regulation was created. So horizon line does not apply to the lots up on St. John's Peak unless they have been developed. So let's just say somebody puts a house in, the horizon line regulation doesn't apply to the construction of the house. But if they want to put a shed in 6 or 7 months later, it applies to the shed because the property has been developed. So it would be the same with us. So the horizon line regs do apply for the pool, but I don't know if the house was built prior to the actual horizon line regulation.
And you're right, it doesn't quite matter, but it's it's almost as if it's a, you don't want to exacerbate the nonconformity. I'm not just to use our common parlance without saying that the house is nonconforming. It's just we don't want to exacerbate the
right.
the pollution of that view.
Right.
Well, I think if this were a pool house, we would say something, but a pool has no height. And they state they're not lighting except for landscape downlighting. I mean, height is really the issue in horizon line.
It is, if you read the horizon line regulation, it really has to do with building up. And there's nothing being built up here. I'm going back and forth on the lights on the retaining wall.
Just a
really. I mean,
quick-
I guess the house is lit anyway, windows are lit anyway. And so it's it looks like from the description that it's a really small retaining wall, and it's, so I'm not sure that it really makes any difference. It's right there, it's really attached to the house. But that's my only thing that I'm thinking about here.
Well, if we
Is there any
approve the
way-
application as written, it says no other lights. So that would be the approval unless they're amending the application.
Well, it's a
What is-
site plan
isn't-
application. We're allowed to have, I'm sorry, Karen, you should- that's-
No, I have a silly question or a fact-finding question. When was the Ridgeline Conservation regulations put into effect? What year was that? Just
That's what
curious.
Matt asked earlier, but I can't remember.
know?
Wait a second. No, I don't have them. I don't know if I have a start date.
It's just a trivia question. I think the property was clear cut way before that, which is why we're seeing this now. And
Right.
I tend to agree with the other members on the commission that we should stick to the application's request and no lights other than what they've first indicated. I mean, you want it to be a safe area, obviously, but that is a glaring point in the sky from the road for sure.
Karen, to
Um,
your point, the way that land looks clear cut, it had to have been before the regulation.
Yeah,
Because
that's
There would-
why I'm
there would be
asking.
Trees on that hill right now. There will.
Yeah.
Well, the regulation talks about the boundaries. And that the boundaries are identified on a map that was created and filed with the Office of the Town Clerk dated 4/15 of 2005.
But
Oh.
I think the land was cleared way before that, like a decade before possibly.
I would like to get some specs on the lights that you're using underneath on that terraced
Sure.
wall.
Okay. Do you want me to try to pull those up now or send them to you tomorrow? I just want
So the commission's, what would the commission like to see?
Well, right now, before we even get that.
Yeah.
You either have to tell us you're going to amend the application or not, because right now the application says that there's no other lights. If you want to amend it, just tell us that you want to amend it to include the lighting, and then we can go forward with getting details about the lighting.
I would like to amend it to include undercap lighting.
Thank you. I'd like to see what the lighting is. I think it's like I said, it's right next to the house. It's the retaining wall goes against the house, but I think we should see what this lighting is before we approve it.
We always define it as downward facing lighting. There would be no uplighting, like uplighting the retaining wall or something like that. This would be recessed lights in the retaining wall.
Correct. So it's literally 6 inches long. I think it's at most an inch copper piece that covers an LED film, LED strip that points straight down. I
Right.
believe it's 1.5 to 2 watts maximum per light. So, and we maybe have 5 because of the length of the wall, I would say at most.
Yeah, it's a very small lumen output.
It is. So I'm just trying to pull up the manufacturer's website, just to show you quickly. Can I share my screen again?
Yes, please.
So- Did that share? Oh, sorry. So, of course, this is an extreme example where they've got a ton of lights, but it's a very low light. It points down. You know, this is just even a 6-inch step going up through. So it's downward lighting. Is that clear? I just want to make
Exactly
sure.
what you mean. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay,
There'd be one every, what?
8 feet at most.
Feet? Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, did I leave that up long enough?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Can you just, when you get an opportunity, Chris, just shoot that along to me?
Yes.
And then I can put it in the file.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
How long is the retaining wall?
It's about 52 feet from the house. The pool itself is 45 feet long, so it extends a little past that. Or just where the pool is placed in the yard, it goes to the end of that. The height is only 20 inches from the patio.
So maybe 8 of those recessed lights across the retaining wall.
Yes.
Or actually, that's in that, yeah.
Yeah, no, there's when how long, I mean, we're talking about 8 feet apart. So how
Yeah,
long?
so it's probably only like
So
4.
it'd be less than that, maybe, but about 6.
So what's the dimension of the retaining wall?
It's 52 feet. Now there's a section, then steps, and then another section. So it's probably 1 light in the first section, and I'd say 4 to 5 lights in the longer section. No more than that.
So I guess I guess that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with I'm a little bit uncomfortable with how it's going to look from Route 7. And without any additional, without any study, not study, but without any plan that shows how it might look with the fence and with that retaining wall and with the proposed grading. I would be nervous about it approving this. No, I'm not. No, I don't think I have a vote here, Chris. So I'm just saying that without some additional information, I would be uncomfortable that this won't increase the visibility of that house from Route 7.
I think we set the pool back as far as we can where it functions well for the client, but it doesn't go towards the precipice. We're not looking to do an infinity edge. So I would say you wouldn't see any difference, but without the physical proof of that, I'm not sure specifically what the commission would want to see. Maybe a photo from Route 7 of the house. It is obvious when you're driving out of town, you do see the house, but I don't think you would see this.
So would somebody else like to weigh in here?
Honestly, I'd like the chance to go and look up there at night over the weekend when somebody's home and see how how visible it is now. I'm a little wary about the landscape lighting. I'm not so concerned about the pool or the pool lights because people generally turn them off unless they're in the pool. But the landscape lighting is something that could be on quite a bit, and I am concerned about how that changes things as you look up and the vista from Route 7. And so I'd like to be able to go up and look up there at night
Well, I did not
from
get
Route 7.
Yeah, I did not get a chance to look at this because I got the packet after I left to Virginia Beach. So I would kind of like to look at it myself too.
Okay.
So does it, because this is a pool that you're building and it's winter, it's,
So,
is it a serious hardship for us to continue this to next month? To give the commission a chance to look up from Route 7 and see what we're doing.
I don't think so. I don't know. The pool builder is probably gonna come in first. We're doing a hardscape around it. And I did the plan for the pool, so I just would have to see. I know they're probably want to get going in April or early May at the latest, but I believe he's got, his applications have to be finished, so.
Is there any way that you can set those lights up on stakes strung across so that they can actually see?
Yeah, we could put a sample light up there, all of them across. Let me see what I can put together for that. Because I think you would see that yes, that would probably be the best way to see it at night,
Yeah.
to see what effect they might have at all. And, if they're home, chances are there'll be lights in the house, so those are gonna outshine pretty much anything we have outside from Route 7, at least, not up there.
Well, it would be best to do it when they're not home. So maybe you could tell us when you do it, and Donna, you could let us know. And we'll.
Okay, yeah, I can coordinate that shortly. So.
Okay, that would be fine. You just have to go individually. If you're gonna go together, I need to warn it, so you need to let me know.
Well, we're not driving up there. We're just looking at
Driving
it.
by.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I'll make a motion that we continue application 1322C to next month, to give everybody a chance to try to look at it from Route 7, and then Chris, you'll let Donna know, and Donna will let the commission know when you've set up some lights for everybody to take a look at.
Okay. After this meeting, when I talk to the client tomorrow, if they turn around and say, well, if that's the case, I'm not gonna do lights, we've crossed that threshold right now. Making the amendment, so we're adjourned to next month.
Yes.
I'm comfortable with that. Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to be clear. Okay.
I need a second. Adam's motion, I need a second.
Second,
Thank you, David.
And I just have a quick question for Chris. Chris, would it be, I know it's work, but how difficult would it be for you to put some proposed grading on this plan and get it back to us?
Yeah, I can do that before next month,
And
in
then-
the next 2 weeks.
That's great. And then also some cut sheets on the fence
Sure.
at the pleasure of the commission.
That's super. Yeah. All right, all in favor, raise your hand. Motion carried. Motion to table is carried.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on to 6A1. Changes to section 2200 4,100 of the Town of Kent zoning regulations dated December 7th, 2021, with regard to definition of restaurant and requirements of restaurant outdoor lighting. So this is a public hearing. Donna, do I need to read the statement?
Yeah, you need to read, open the public hearing and read the legal notice into the record, please.
Okay. So at 8:06, open the public hearing to review. This is a notice of public hearing. The Town of Kent Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing via Zoom meeting on Thursday, March 10th, 2022, beginning at 7 p.m. to discuss the possibility of acting on changes to sections 2200, 4000, 4100 of the Town of Kent zoning regulations dated December 7th, 2021, with regard to the definition of restaurant and the requirements of restaurant outdoor dining. Any corresponding should be sent to this website. At this hearing, persons shall participate and be heard. The Zoom meeting number can be located at the official agenda and will be filed in the Town of Kent website a minimum of 48 hours prior to the official Zoom meeting. Wesley Wyrick, Chairman. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address this? So as I understand, this is just a simple change in the definition of restaurant. Is that right, Donna?
Yeah, what happened was with the new public acts that went into place, as a result of the lifted restrictions that were set up during COVID with regard to outdoor dining by restaurants, the Public Act actually decided to go ahead and continue all of those restrictions, or the lifting of the restrictions. So now it turns out the Public Act states that we cannot regulate outdoor dining the way that we had in the past. And if you look at the information, we required some outdoor dining to be allowed via a special permit, some was site plan, and that's no longer allowed. So basically what we're doing is, my proposal for you guys is to look at the resolution of approval, which will change the existing definition and take out the 50% of the customer seats are located within an enclosed building, to make it just read that establishments that serve food and beverages to customers only when seated at tables or counters. Such establishments may include a food takeout service, incidental, and blah, blah, blah. So we need to change that regulation and then, or change the definition and then change the existing sections of 4123.2, 4123, 41.23, and then remove 4131.5, renumber 4131.6, and then remove 4133.3. And that takes out of the regulations any kind of way that we regulate outdoor dining. I don't think, as we had discussed at last month's meeting, there are certain restrictions that you can put on the outdoor dining, such as making sure that the outdoor dining area is identified either with planters. You can talk about hours of operation. You can talk about music, sound, advertising, signage. But in all honesty, you know, with COVID over the past couple of years, I don't want to say it was a free-for-all, but there was a lot of outdoor dining that normally would not have been allowed had it not been for the COVID restrictions. And I did not get one complaint. Speaking to some of the restaurant owners, a restaurant owner is not going to put out that many seats if their kitchen can't fulfill the orders, because it's just not going to work for them, and it's not going to work for the popularity of that restaurant if their popularity starts to go down. So I think that for the time being, just changing it and considering it an accessory use and letting the restaurant owners take the responsibility of making sure that all of the outdoor seating is safe, it's not blocking any of the sidewalks, exits or entrances. It's going to be up to them because it's their liability. And in order to do that, this would be the only way to get that done.
So this would not increase their head count for a restaurant, Don, is that correct? As it might relate to parking or any other aspect?
Exactly. So we don't have seating limitations for restaurants. The seating limitations are driven basically by the fire marshal.
That's right.
And also by parking.
Sure, but outside, there's no means of exit, is there? So
Right.
it's not really a fire marshal's purview for outside dining. Is that correct?
It was during COVID. I don't know if that's continued through on this or not. I would have to ask Stan that question. But it does not affect the seating allocation for bakeries, delis. That seating allocation is 15 seats based on that description. So it doesn't change that, which basically means that, and I'm going to use Wilson's as the prime example because that's really the only example we have. They have at least in the front, I'm going to say 15 seats and probably 4 rocking chairs. And they probably have, I'm going to say 10 or 12 seats in the back. So 15, you're up to 27 seats. But they are only allowed to have 15 seats on the inside of Wilson's, and anything more than that is violation of the zoning regulations. Because of the classification of Wilson's, it's not classified as a restaurant. It's classified as a bakery delicatessen. So that is the criteria under which they fall. So the outdoor seating regulation would not change that requirement based on the usage.
You're saying they're limited to, technically limited to 15 total seats, indoors and outdoors?
Well, if you take out that one paragraph, that one statement in the existing regulation, because if you do,
Okay.
then they would only be allowed to have 7 seats outside or 8.
Right, but you said it doesn't affect the total number of seats they can have. So they're
on the inside.
But if we remove that, then there's no more. I got too many windows open here.
So what you would need to do is you would need to change the permitted by site plan approval, which is 4123.3. Bakeries, delicatessen, ice cream parlors, coffee shops, and similar food retail and serving establishments, provided that, and then under B, any indoor seating accommodation shall not exceed 15% of the gross floor area or a maximum of 15 seats. So what we're looking at is just outdoor dining and not looking at the interior. That would be a conversation that you would need to have at another time.
So there's no limitation to outdoor seating derived from that maximum or any other. It's just limited by the good sense of the restaurant owner.
Right.
Okay.
If we go forward with the resolution of approval, that's the case.
Yeah. Wes, this is Hiram Williams. I have a question. I'm not sure what the procedure is.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Donna. I noticed that last month, the owner of the former Frank's space changed the change of use from cafe or I guess it was called bakery, or I can't remember what it was, but it was changed from the broad category of cafe, coffee shop, etc., to restaurant.
Right.
And there were seemingly no questions from the commission regarding parking or any other limitations. Was the purpose of that change to somehow make this regulation of outdoor seating more palatable, or were there other?
No, I don't, I guess I don't, the change to the outdoor dining is being driven by a change to the Public Act.
Right, so there would be no advantage to Wilson's to go to from cafe to restaurant.
Well, you're not going to be you would have to come in and have this conversation with the commission, which we've had on a number of occasions. And I think it's probably because it's 10 North Main Street, and we'd have to see how that all applies with your lease and the parking agreement, the shared parking agreement that everybody has with 9 Maple Street.
Okay, I was just under the impression that any change of use triggered a reversion to current restrictions rather than anything that was grandfathered. And maybe that's a mistaken assumption.
I'm not sure I understand what that means.
I thought that any change of use from one use to another use
Right.
negated any grandfathered provisions that existed with regard to parking.
I thought we touched on parking, and it was very, very quick because it was right on Route 7, and there's parking on 7, and the parking necessary for either of the uses. There was enough parking that was sufficient.
Yeah, I recall
Well,
that
was
as well.
She
in
was
the
only open at night. She was not open during the day, so she's only open at night and has full use of the entire Route 7 area.
Okay, but just I guess a basic question. Am I correct or incorrect that a change of use triggers a reversion to current requirements rather than grandfathered?
I guess we're all struggling, Hiram, with what you mean by grandfathered.
Well, pre-existing non-conforming conditions that existed before planning and zoning regs went into place.
Okay, that's not really what I meant. What I meant was what you're referring, which use you're referring to as being grandfathered. Anything specific, or are you just talking in general terms?
No. I'm talking very specifically about the Frank's space. The parking requirements for that space, or the parking requirements for the Wilson space, were pre-existing parking accommodations that were not relative to current parking requirements, Matt. I mean, for example, a number of the businesses on Main Street were businesses and remain businesses that were there before planning and zoning. So their parking requirements, or lack thereof, were grandfathered. Am I being clear?
Hiram, I just don't know if you're correct about that. I mean,
Well,
it was
Donna's-
a bakery. It was a bakery when Stasha's was there, and
Right,
it's
right,
not a
okay.
bakery now.
Right, but it
used
went
to
from
be.
bakery to restaurant.
Yeah,
Right.
and there was a discussion about parking then.
But
and the
does that,
restaurant had to meet the
Okay.
parking regulations.
okay,
There was
it's
nothing
a,
grandfathered.
it does meet the current parking regulations?
Yeah, because they've got Route 7 that they use. They're allowed to use parking within 500 feet. So they
As is
have the park.
Wilson's, right?
Wilson's is a completely different character because you have a shared parking agreement that was put into place when all the work was done on 9 Maple Street. There's I believe that there's something in your lease that refers to the use of Wilson's, And that it had to stay the way that it was unless your lease gets renegotiated. So I think I don't think that you can compare Wilson's to Kingsley's and the
Okay,
change
well,
of use.
The 10 North Main Street building was not a part of the shared parking agreement. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just trying to understand whether or not a change of use triggers a requirement that the new use meets current parking standards.
It does. It does. Yes.
It
Yeah,
does.
there's no question.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's, you get a new use, it goes through this, we bring that new use into conformity with the zoning regulations.
Okay, and so if this is just academic, if Wilson's went from the old use to the new use, it would have to meet the new use, i.e. restaurant, if they chose to do that for
In addition
parking.
to the shared parking agreement that we've got in place for that structure.
Right, okay, I don't mean to bore everyone. I think that the shared parking, anyway, another time.
That's
You
why we
answered
can
my
do it.
question. You answered my question.
Took
Thanks,
us a while to
Ira.
get there, but we got there.
That's all
Yeah,
right.
sorry.
That's
It's not
okay.
as easy in Zoom as it is in person.
Sure. So are there any other questions or comments?
So Donna, I have a comment with regard to section 4131.5 and the recommendation that we remove it altogether. And I just wonder, and I know we talked about it last month, and you just talked about it now that the restaurants have done a really good job of self-regulating, but does it make sense to leave in some protection for us that the seating not intrude on parking or other public ways? And I know that by leaving that in, we have to actually say outdoor seating is permitted so long as it does not intrude into sidewalks and other public ways. And I'm not sure whether the commission wants to actually say that out loud with regard to the outdoor seating being required, because right now, if we make the changes that we're going to make, it doesn't specifically mention outdoor seating. But it makes sense to me that we at least talk about whether the outdoor seating can be on the sidewalks and pedestrians then having to go out into the street. More of a public safety issue than anything.
I mean, if you want to leave it in, you would need to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, you would have to take out up to four seats. And start the sentence at outdoor seating. Rework it so that it says that the outdoor seating does not intrude on the sidewalk or the public ways.
Yeah, and I think simply if everybody somewhat agrees, then the sentence would read outdoor seating for restaurant patrons, provided that such seating does not intrude on the sidewalk or any public ways. So you get rid of the first part, the first up to 4 seats, that gets deleted, and then you also delete the parenthetical at the end of that sentence where you say see also section 4133, because that's going to come out as well.
You would need to apply that to 41333 and 41341, I think, to be consistent. If we're actually worried that we think people are going to just toss seats in the middle of the road for patrons, I don't know.
Well, 41333 is going to be actually taken out. Because we're not going to, by site plan, you're not going to approve up to 16 seats.
You took the whole
Because it's
section
permitted by
out?
right, so you don't really need to talk about any place else. You don't need to talk about it as a special permit or even a site plan, because it's permitted by right.
Right.
Permitted by
Just by right. I mean, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's correct.
I agree with Matt. I could see, as people get busier in the summer, where somebody might say, okay, well, this is not such a bad spot in the parking lot or off the sidewalk, or we can block a little more of the sidewalk. I think that the restaurants and the bakeries can certainly figure out how many seats they can handle outside, but they shouldn't impede on the walkways and throughways in the parking lots. And
Well, truly, that
stating
is
it
common,
would be a good
that
idea.
is truly common sense, but the fact of the matter is that's not their property.
Right.
I mean, they really can't seat people that it's not on their property.
Unless they just do.
Well,
That's, somewhere I think we should state it. They shouldn't.
well, I don't disagree with Matt. I mean, it doesn't hurt to state it.
I would agree with that. I think leaving it in, starting with outdoor seating makes it read nicely and reminds people, don't do that, please.
And there are definitely some restaurateurs in the group who might weigh in.
Alyssa, you're muted if you'd like to say something.
You're still muted.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. No, I hear you on being on public property that are on sidewalks. We're going to try and figure out how to move the seats back so it doesn't take up the sidewalk space there. But I have a question for you on talking about outdoor seating. Is there a music factor or a noise factor that is part of this outdoor seating? Like outdoor music? I mean, special, like, I don't know, here I go again, special events, not the concern, but everyday outdoor music, having outdoor music blaring along in town. Just curious.
We did have this discussion at one point in time, and the commission felt that it wasn't under their purview, and that would be something that they were hoping the chamber would address.
Okay.
That was how that's how I remember it.
Okay.
Because it became a question, right, about accessory use, and it's accessory use, what's the term? Incidental, right? Incidental to the primary use.
Right,
And
accessory.
whether it's, yeah, included, whether it's allowed by the regulation, or whether it's, you can prove that it's customarily incidental, and the argument can be made that it's customarily incidental. So we thought that the chamber would jump in and say that's not every restaurant going down the road should have different music playing.
Right, at the same time, because there was music coming out of Kent, there was music coming out of the Kent Center, and then there was the music coming out behind the railroad of the pharmacy. That is something that you're allowed to put into the regulation if you feel that it's something that you can, that is a concern. So you can't, like, let's just say that all of a sudden, you get all these wonderful umbrellas that are being put up and they're advertising Heineken or Kent Falls Brewing. So you're not necessarily going to want to allow advertising like that. So you can say, if you're going to put up umbrellas, they have to be, solid colors or plain colors or no advertising. You can say hours of operation for music could be this. Hours of operation, on the weekends, you need to be out of there. I think it says you can't close it down any earlier than 11 on the weekends, but you definitely can put a time limit on there for midnight. So you can address those at a later time if you're finding that that stuff is being abused.
Does that go to become an ordinance at some point? Like, where does it go from zoning to?
It would be a zoning reg. It would be an update to the zoning reg.
Okay.
That you would then put conditions, like you just said here, that outdoor seating, provided that the seating does not intrude on the sidewalk, and that, music would be provided only up until certain hours, and that, you know, advertising is, you know, on umbrellas is not allowed, and you know, that you have to put some kind of divider up, like a big planter with plants in it. Those are some of the things that you can add to the regulation, but just to be in line with the Public Act at this point in time, changing the regulation is something that we need to do. And then you can go in and fine tune it at a later time.
Right. I was going to say that's a little bit beyond this resolution.
Right. But that was something that I had provided last month, and you guys were like, oh my goodness, can't we just do the basic and then we can bring that back up again?
Yeah, I would be inclined to continue to support that idea and wait until we have some reason to regulate more finely. I think that's what we all decided last week or last month.
David, you're saying that we should go with the proposed change in definition of restaurant?
Yeah, with Matt's minor adjustments.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and then if it becomes an issue because we find businesses are doing something that, you know, the whole town finds difficult to stomach, that we then look at more tightly regulating it at that point.
So is that a proposal?
We have to close the public hearing first.
Yeah, the public
Oh,
should
you do.
finish if there's any other input.
Jason
Thank you, Matt.
Perillo has a question. Jason, go
Donna,
ahead,
thank
Jason.
you. I appreciate it.
welcome.
For the record, Jason Perillo, High Watch Recovery Center. As you know, we own Wilson's, and as Donna mentioned, we're a little bit of a different animal than other restaurants specifically that are on Route 7. And I have a question. I want to make sure I have my head wrapped around it, because we are not a restaurant, that we are actually designated as a bakery, which is sub 3 within the regulations. I just want to make sure that our outdoor seating would not be treated differently than a restaurant as defined in the regulations. Is that clear? Is that the commission's intent at this point?
I would say yes.
I think so. You know, a restaurant is defined in the regulation, but a bakery and delicatessen are not. So you've got a bakery and delicatessen as a permitted use, but not defined. So I think the way you laid it out is right for me personally, Jason. I think that's correct. That delis, bakeries, delicatessens, restaurants, in terms of outdoor seating, would be viewed equally.
Right. I think the only reason the category is there for bakeries and that kind of thing is actually for seating. But restaurant clearly says establishments that serve food and beverages to customers only when seated at tables or counters. So you're serving food at a table or a counter. So you would be classified as a restaurant. And then there's a subcategory underneath that is allowed. And then that's what pulls in all the parking requirements and the seating requirements and that kind of thing.
Okay, and so that helps me. I appreciate it, because as you know, the statute references eating establishment and then sort of leaves it up, to the commission to define what that is. But it sounds like I'm just obviously trying to protect Wilson's and make sure that we're not at I don't want to say a disadvantage, but that we're in a situation where we're having to retract what we've done. We've become pretty popular. Sort of proud to say we were. We were the top new restaurant in the state of Connecticut in Connecticut Magazine. So we want to make sure we can keep doing what we're doing and do it well. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the commission's time. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jason.
So to move forward with the if we decide to move forward with the resolution of approval, we need to put Matt's change into writing, because the resolution of approval will have to be read publicly, now into record.
I think we can do that.
I just have a quick question. Do Torrington area health regulations play into this at all? As far as how far you can bring food from a kitchen to a table or anything like that?
I don't know. I've never asked Kathy. I know that they were involved when outdoor dining first started during COVID with regard to hard surfaces and absorbent surfaces and whether or not they were on grass or dirt, that kind of thing. I don't know if I don't know if they had any say on the distances of the tables from the kitchen. I would think that as a restaurateur, the last thing that you want to do is deliver cold food. So you're going to try to make sure that you're at least bringing hot food out there. But I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a question that we could ask Kathy, but I've never heard her say anything like that in all the conversations that we have had. I know it did not come up during, when the outdoor dining started as a result of COVID.
The only regulation that you have to be aware of is, like Donna said, you have to serve food on a solid surface. So like, a wooden surface, cannot be grass, and it has to have a cover over it. So either an umbrella or an awning or a roof. That's all. That's the only requirement.
Does someone want to take a stab at doing the resolution? Well, first you need to close the public hearing. If you're done with conversation, I'm not trying to rush you. If you're done with conversation, do you want to close the public hearing, try to read the definition, read the resolution? Or do you want to table this for another month? I don't want to do that, but it's your call.
So I would move that we close the public hearing.
Let's second it.
Any other discussion? Adam, are you okay with that? Okay. All in favor with that? Raise your hand. We'll close the public hearing at 8:39.
Okay.
And then to move it along, I would move to make the changes.
Matt, I just have a question. If you're not elevated, can you do all that?
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
I don't think you can.
You guys are right. Yeah. All right. I'll be quiet. I am.
Well, Matt, why don't we just elevate you then?
We don't have a full commission, so we should.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm just in Mark.
Yeah, I missed.
7. Okay, fine.
Yep.
Great. That's okay with everybody that I just keep
Yeah,
talking?
you bet.
You'll have to just remember that you can just tell me to shut up and I'll anyway, so I'll move that we make the changes to the Town of Kent Planning and Zoning regulations dated December 21 as recommended in the documents presented tonight, with the change that rather than remove 4131.5, we modify 4131.5 to read seating for restaurant patrons. I'm sorry, outdoor seating for restaurant patrons, provided that such seating does not intrude on the sidewalk or other public ways.
I will second that.
And are you gonna you don't want to say and delete what's within the parentheses, or you're just going to stop it there, right?
I'm just going to stop it there because we're deleting some text in the beginning. We're deleting some text in the end. So the changes to just those words that I came out of my mouth.
Okay. David seconded that.
Good.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Well, that motion will carry, but you have to do another one. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was that?
This motion will carry, but you'll have to make another motion. Unless you want to wrap them all together. And if you look at the second page of the resolution, I talk about the removal of 4131.5, so that needs to come out. And the renumber of 4131.6 to 4131.5 needs to be deleted from the resolution as well. So do you want to tack that in?
I
think
thought that was
that
included in what
my-
Matt said.
Yeah, it's that
Is-
hold on, that my motion said that we will accept these changes as written, except for the one change to 4131.5. So I don't think we need to do anything other than I mean, unless you feel more comfortable with reading the whole thing, Donna.
I don't think you need to read the whole thing. I think what you need to do is, in addition, remove the removal of 4131.5 and renumber of 4131.6.
I don't think so, but I'm happy to amend my motion to include those things.
I think you should.
So Donna, you sent us a resolution of approval. The
Right.
resolution of approval is 2 pages, page and a half, but it's 2 pages, and it goes from it has the resolution, the resolved, it's got the definition, the existing definition and the proposed definition. It's got the change to 4123.2 and the proposed, so the existing and the proposed. It goes on to talk about the removal of 4131.5, which we discussed, and the renumbering of 4131.6. That's right. That doesn't get renumbered because 4131.6 will stay in because 4134.5 stays in. But
Right.
then the removal of 4133.3 is part of the resolution. The removal of 4131.4 and the renumbering of 41 of the others, the 4134.2, 3, 4, and 5 doesn't have to happen, or it still happens, and in adopting the resolution. So I think all of those things happen except for the modifications that I made in my motion.
Okay,
Dawn, are you good with that?
yeah.
Okay.
Just tell us what you want us to do, Don, and we'll do it because you're certainly the expert.
I would just say, in addition, that those removals and renumbers not be done. That's all.
Just the first 2.
Yep.
So
And then the rest stays.
you want Matt just to say that to remove the removal of 4131.5 and renumber 4131.6 to 4131.5.
Right.
If something is removed, it's removed. Why do you have to tell us it's removed? Stating that.
Remove it from the approval page,
Oh, okay.
because the
resolution to make the
resolution for
changes
approval
states it.
states it.
Right.
So we're
Right.
Don's asking us to just state that those 2 lines are removed from the condition of the approval. Resolution of approval.
Oh, Matt, I can withdraw my second so you can amend your motion and I can resecond. And we can.
I just want to be sure that I understand. We're talking about at the top of page 2, that rather than removing 4131.5, we're modifying 4131.5.
Right,
And
Yeah.
rather than renumbering 4131.6, we're leaving it in.
right.
And then
And
we're
I
still
will-
removing 4134.1.
That all stays the same underneath.
Yep. It was just
Okay.
those first two lines.
It's just the
That's-
first two lines.
Okay,
That's all.
then that's fine. That was the intent of my motion. If it's more clear now, that's great.
Yeah.
So I would amend my motion to incorporate this discussion that we just had.
Okay,
I will second that.
thanks, David.
Okay, everybody, I'm sure that's clear.
Certainly hope so.
If all in favor signify by raising your hand. All right. We have a approval.
Okay. That was the easy one.
Thanks for
Yeah.
keeping us on track, Donna.
Oh. September, when is September coming?
All right, our second public hearing of 6A.2 is a public hearing that we should open at 8:47 by reading the notice of public hearing. The Town of Kent Planning and Zoning Commission shall hold a public hearing via Zoom meeting on Thursday, March 10th, 2022, beginning at 7 p.m. to discuss the possibility and act on opting out of certain subsections of the Public Act 2129 with regard to accessory apartments and parking requirements for residential uses. Any corresponding documentation shall be filed in the March 10th public meeting folder. At this hearing, person may participate and be heard. The Zoom meeting number can be located on the official agenda that will be filed with the Town of Kent's website a minimum of 48 hours prior to official Zoom meeting. Wesley Wyrick, Chairman. All right, so we have two items to consider. One is the subsection 6 Public Act 2129. Donna, which is the parking requirement, right?
They're combined together. Let me get my stuff together. Ooh, 'cause
Okay,
this
so
one,
we're going to opt out as one, not necessarily as two.
right.
Okay.
So basically, when Desegregate Connecticut came into play, there were a lot of legislation that was proposed. And a lot of it had to do with the removal of zoning's ability to regulate certain uses. And I think as a compromise to the legislation, they included an opt-out so that the commission, along with the legislative board, which is the Board of Selectmen, could opt out of this new Public Act 2129 with regard to the accessory apartments. We allow accessory apartments in different ways in different locations. As you know, there's the detached accessory dwelling unit, which is in the rural district, is actually just another large house on another piece of property, and that's approved by special permit. If we don't opt out of this, that will just be able to happen as of right. Internal accessory dwelling units basically is almost as of right, because that is converting a single family house to a two-family house, which is approved as of right. in most cases, in all of the districts. And then the attached accessory dwelling unit, to me, still converts a single family house to a 2-family house, which is as of right. So for us to opt out of this, I don't believe is really that big of a deal. I had one of the things that was in the public meeting folder was what other towns were doing. And I think the land use administrator from Salisbury said it best. They are opting out because what they're finding is that all of the houses, all of the accessory dwelling units that are being built in the Salisbury area right now are pretty much very, very large single-family homes and really not affordable. And so it kind of defeats the whole purpose of what this whole process was. And so they have decided that they are going to opt out and continue doing what they're doing. And I think Kent is similar to Salisbury with that respect. If you look back at all of the accessory dwelling units that we have been building over the past 2 years, I think the smallest one is 3,000 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't believe that they truly are what you call an accessory dwelling unit under what Desegregate Connecticut wanted it to be. If you don't opt out by January 1st of 2023, then the Public Act goes into effect and you lose your rights to regulate anything. So I think opting out of it is the way to go. That's my opinion, just based on what we have been allowing and how we allow things to get built at this point in time. You know, Desegregate Connecticut, I think, was a great thing, but I do not believe that Desegregate Connecticut actually works for 100% of Connecticut, and that was the major downfall, I think, of the whole purpose. But that's a whole different conversation that we can have. So basically what happens is you guys discuss what you want to discuss. If you want to discuss it, you make a motion to either opt out, or if you decide that you don't want to opt out, that's up to you guys to make that decision. If you decide to opt out, we have to have 2/3 vote in order for that to happen. And then the opt-out gets handed up to the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Selectmen then have to also opt out as well. Once that happens, then we have to change our regulations based on 2 paragraphs that Mike Ziska has written that we need to put in our zoning regulations. And that will go through the whole process like we just did now. So this is not, if you opt out now, if the Board of Selectmen opt out, and I am highly recommending that they do so, the board, and Mike was the one who said we should opt out. This is not just my decision, it was our attorney's decision as well. If the Board of Selectmen will opt out at their March 17th meeting, then I can start the process of having a public hearing to change the regulations. So we're looking at probably not until May. By the time,
I'm sorry, can you just clarify? You said we have to amend the zoning regulations if we opt out? And
yes.
what do we have to do specific to the opt out?
With right now, all you need to do is just make the decision to opt out. And then, where's mine? Mike actually wrote what I need to put in the regulation. Hold on one second.
So this is Justin Potts. So just to clarify, that amendment that is referenced in the resolution that's prepared was not included in the meeting packet?
No, because the resolution hasn't been written yet because nobody has made a determination as to what they're going to do.
So there's a resolution. There's a resolution prepared in the meeting packet that made reference to an amendment that was going to be made.
Right.
Then that amendment was not in there?
No, the amendment's not in there yet.
Got it.
We
So,
just have
well,
to decide
because
first
what
whether we're
we're
going to opt out, and then from there we decide how the regulations are going to be changed with upon the recommendation of our attorney.
So Mike did actually, I have to add a subsection 3 to section 1410. And then add section 4 to section 1410. And that was the zoning regulation amendments that Mike Ziska has recommended. But first, we have to go through the resolution to actually opt out. And then at the May meeting, the resolution would come out to change this, what the change will be to the zoning regulation.
At which point we'll have another public hearing.
Yes, we have to go through the whole process. I've got to notify the councils of government. I have to notify the adjoining towns. It has to be in the newspaper and it has to be warned. And then there will be a public hearing for comment.
I'm sorry if I'm being dense, but what is the intent of the thing we have to do next? After, if we opt out, you said then we have to change our regulations. What you mentioned, 2 sections we have to change.
Right.
Are they just technical, or are we?
It's just technical.
Okay, so we're not actually committing to a change. We just have to tidy up something if we opt out.
Right, because then what happens is the regulation actually says that certain uses not expressly permitted under the regulations may nonetheless be allowed under certain provisions of state law. And it's all legalese that Mike has written and created to be put into the regulations.
All right.
Okay, Karen, you had Karen Garrity.
Thank you. I'm just a little confused. Like, I don't understand. I mean, a public hearing, and this is actually what I dialed in for tonight, is to I don't even understand what you guys are opting out of. Like, how can we be voting on something that we don't know what we're voting not to do or to do?
There's a document in the package in the supporting documents for the meeting that talks about well, it talks about what we're talking about here.
Okay, well, I did look through things, but I'm still very confused.
So basically what happened was a public act was created during the state legislature that changed the way that the zoning commission can regulate the construction, addition, use of accessory dwelling units. And it basically took away all of our rights to be able to regulate them unless you opt out of that.
Can you give me an example of that, of how that affects us?
That means that if someone wants to build an accessory dwelling unit on a rural piece of land where there is another house, we would not be able to regulate it as a special permit the way that we are regulating it now. So we would continue to regulate that as we have been now, if we opt out of it.
Right, but isn't that the point of the legislation, to allow that to happen and not complicate that process, particularly when we have, you know, so many issues of affordable housing and elderly and even young, you know, younger generations are having a hard time finding where they can afford to live. I mean, I thought that was, in my understanding, that was the reason behind that initiative, was to allow that to happen and create more affordable housing.
It has nothing to do with affordable housing. At least in Kent, it does not. Like in Salisbury, it does not.
But how, but
because we allow the accessory dwelling units to be put up via special permit, but we don't regulate the size of the houses that are going to be built there. So if you're putting in a house that is, you know, 4,000 square feet, how is that affordable? Because we don't regulate the size of what that accessory dwelling unit could be.
That in Kent, that's what the accessory housing is going to be. Somebody's going to put a 4,000 square foot house up. I mean, if I wanted to put something up on my property for Hazel to come live in, it's not gonna be 4,000 square feet.
Well, that
And
would
not-
be
I
your
live in
choice.
Kent, And I live in
I was
Kent.
gonna say,
you know.
I think we'd be happy to see that, and any sort of accessory dwellings is allowed. I think the challenges right now is that what's being built in Kent seems to be very large secondary houses that are not affordable.
But it just seems like that's a broad stroke that then takes away from what, again, my limited understanding of what the intent of this is, and to say, well, in Kent, nobody will do that. They're all building, big houses. I just think I would just really encourage the commission to really think through all of that. And, there are a lot more property owners in Kent than just people who are building mega things. And we have a huge housing issue in this town for finding opportunities. I mean, I'm a landlord, and I have very affordable rents in the apartments that I have in this town, and I do that as a financial detriment to myself of what I could, there's just, I don't know. I just really, really encourage you guys not to whitewash this as being, this is a wealthy town, and if anybody's building anything, they're going to build big stuff that you guys can't regulate. I don't think that's what the intent of this is, and to just dismiss it because of that, I have a problem with.
So I'll jump in here. We just recently, over the past, when we rewrote our regulations, we really made it more. We really made accessory dwelling units within the village center much more attainable. So we loosened the regulations for the accessory dwelling units within the village, and we're a little bit worried about what's gonna happen in the rural jurisdiction. We believe that the way we're regulating accessory dwelling units in Kent is really carefully considered. It's through regulation change. It's through looking at the plan of conservation and development. So we believe that we are the best people to decide how we regulate accessory dwelling units. We are certainly not, as I think is demonstrated time and time again from us as this commission, we're not really exclusionary. We're not exclusionary at all. So we believe that we are the best group to regulate accessory dwelling units, and the state is from their pedestal. They're not really in a position to tell us how to regulate ourselves. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. Looking at the regulation, it's heavy-handed from the state. We believe that we do a really good job at regulating accessory dwelling units, both in town and in the rural district. And we want to hold on to our God-given right to regulate ourselves.
So what is a concern that you all have? Is it like distance from the road? I mean, the previous conversation was about lighting.
Well, you have to answer that question by looking at the regulations and understand what our concerns are.
So I just want to bring up a factual issue. So in section 6200 regarding accessory dwelling units, they are limited to 33% of the floor area of the principal dwelling. So I don't get this 3,000 square foot. Wait, what?
No, they're not. At one point in time, they were. And then we changed our regulations so that there is no limit any longer.
So I'm looking at the existing regulations for Kent.
Okay. Well, what page are you on? 6200.
6200, page 98. Number 6, an accessory dwelling unit or guest house shall not exceed 33% of the floor area of principal dwelling unless otherwise approved by the commission due to logical configuration of interior space.
What date are you looking at as far as the regulations are concerned?
It looks like July 2018, I believe.
Yeah, December of 2021 are the new regulations.
That's an old set.
So that's an old set of regulations. So when we rewrote our regulations, we did put that in there. But we had 3 houses, accessory dwelling units that came before us in a matter of 2 months. None of them could meet that requirement, and they would all have to have gotten variances. So, so we took that, we changed the regulation and we took that requirement out.
Got it. Okay, so I was just looking at the regulations that were on the Kent website. So I'd also like to sort of get back to this conflation of the 2 provisions here in Public Act 21-21-29. So there's the accessory dwelling unit provision, and I do generally agree that Kent does a very good job with accessory dwelling units. Attached units are allowed pretty much, by right throughout most of town, except for I think the Birch Hill district, and that is great. However, the parking minimums are completely different, part of Public Act 21-29, and Kent currently requires 2.5 parking spaces for studio and 1-bedroom apartments. Matt, you made the comment about Kent not being exclusionary, but I don't see why you would require 2.5 parking spaces for a studio apartment. And I'd love to hear the commission sort of explain what the rationale is for requiring that much parking for a studio apartment.
So, I'll jump in and say that, both the letter that you wrote, Justin, and the letter that that Virginia wrote, I think we're absolutely reasonable, and I think that the parking regulations should be we should address those the parking the number of parking spaces required based on what both you and Virginia say. I don't think that conversation precludes this. To me, that's a separate issue, and thank you for writing. Thank you for saying what you did, because I think you're right. I think that we should change those parking, the number of spaces required for those different uses, whether they're affordable, whether they're not single family, but more than 2 bedrooms in the dwelling, or a single bedroom or a studio. I think all of those things we have to take a look at, and I think we should take a look at as we go through these next set of public hearings. But I don't think that affects the decision that we're trying to make tonight.
So the ADU regulations, again, I agree that I think the commission has a good reason to opt out of those, because Ken has some pretty good regulations on those. But the Public Act 21-29, it's very straightforward with respect to the parking. It reduces the minimums down to 1 space for studio and 1 bedroom, and down to 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms or more. So I don't see what the gain is in opting out of the parking minimum. And again, these are 2 separate parts of Public Act 21-29, the ADUs and the parking minimum. And so, part of the opt-out provision is that the commission is going to have to go on record with their reasoning for opting out. And I have not seen any good reason for the commission to opt out of the reduced parking minimums of Public Act 21-29, and it's right there in the requirements of opting out that you need to provide a rationale for it. And in the opt-out resolution that was provided in the meeting packet, there was a reference to an amendment that was going to be happening, but and that was going to be the commission's rationale for opting out. But the language for the amendment is not even there. And I was hoping to see that the commission was going to be reducing the parking down to what it is in Public Act 21-29, or even lower, like a lot of the neighboring towns do, but it's not there.
I'm curious where you're getting this whole thing about a studio.
It's in Public Act 21-29.
No. I understand I know what Public Act 21-29 is, but you said that a studio requires 2.5 parking spaces.
Yes. So for any.
But they don't.
In the regulation, in the parking regulations, 2.5 parking spaces are required for any unit in a multi-dwelling building.
Okay. Because the rationale behind that 2.5 spaces is, in a multifamily dwelling unit, you're looking at, let's just say that there's 3 apartments in there, because that's what multi is 3 or more. And what you're looking for, people that are going to be having visitors and guests that are coming over. And that was the rationale behind the 2.5 spots. Was so that you had to take into account people who were coming to visit.
You could require 6 units, 6 parking spaces, but it should be grounded in some sort of data and reasoning. So requiring 2.5 spaces across the board, for any apartment, whether it's a studio apartment or 3 bedrooms, I do not see the reasoning for it. Yeah, and a lot of the neighboring towns that require even less parking than what's required in Public Act 21-29. You're going to say we don't want multifamily housing, and again, require as much parking that as you declare is required, to keep multifamily housing out of the town. But I think it's clear that sort of thing is no longer reasonable.
Well, it's who is to say, Justin, what's reasonable and what's not? Is it the state or is it us? And if we're gonna have a conversation about what's reasonable for parking, first off, I don't think it's fair for you to say, coming in and looking at a set of regulations that's not current, and without understanding the machinations that we've gone through as a commission over the past, as long as I've been here, to say that they're not based in reason. So that's one. But if you're saying that we should be revising the parking regulation, I think you're right. But I want to, and this is just me as a member of the commission, as a junior member of the commission, even, that my belief is that we should be the masters of our own destiny, and we should regulate ourselves. And if we want to talk about the parking, if your objection is the parking, I'll tell you I agree. And we should revise that section, but I don't think that we should opt in, because the kicker for me is that our land use attorney, the guy who we rely on for most of our legal decisions, have told us we should opt out.
Well, I'll jump in here to say that I think that we ought to revisit that parking as well, because that's the one thing that stood out. And Justin, thank you for that analysis, because I thought it was extremely well done.
I thought that the letters submitted and the real life examples were really helpful and demonstrative, and a pretty accurate picture of how there probably is excessive parking requirements in town. I also think it's smart to think about strategy in some regard to being proactive of changing things that, we're sort of admitting here are excessive before the state has another crack at telling us what to do. Once again, if we recognize something is perhaps not correct and we change it, that's more rationale for us to keep the control over our regulations. A lot of times things don't happen unless there's an enforcement mechanism, and the opt-out is getting us out of that, but who knows how long that will happen. And in terms of rationalizing our opt-out preference, can we state that we're opting out because we have the intention of changing our parking regulations based on this conversation? So we don't need to adopt what the state is giving us under their guidance.
So when I saw the proposed opt-out provision, the resolution and the reference to the amendments, I assumed that was going to be in there. And I was checking back to see if the amendments that were proposed were going to be included, but they never were. So I think the commission should wait on this vote until they see what the actual amendment, coming from Mike Zizka is going to be. And what is the parking going to get reduced down to?
I don't think the amendments from Mike are referring to parking or accessory dwelling units. It sounds like they were technical revisions. But if we opt out, I believe certainly for me, and I think for all my fellow commissioners, the deficiencies identified in the regulations would need to be addressed. And I think they could be addressed certainly in line with the spirit of what the state is requesting that we do. And similarly for accessory dwelling units, as you point out, I think we have a pretty liberal approach to how we regulate them. I think one can make an argument that maybe they need to be liberal in other ways that they're not right now, or perhaps there's things we want to regulate differently to encourage more affordable housing specifically. I will point out that if we do not opt out, we lose the flexibility in all ways. It means we simply have to do what the state says. And if the state has implemented a regulation which is more appropriate for a urban district, and we try to put that in place here, and I guess the example I will point to is that right now accessory dwellings are largely being built as very large units. Maybe we should be taking a crack at fixing that to encourage the more small housing, and not simply say all accessory dwellings will be allowed, because then all of a sudden we lose the ability to influence it the way that I think all of us would like to see.
First of all, you also have to know that we do change regulations when an applicant or someone from the public brings to us a reason to do it. I mean, it's a lot of regulations. We'd be constantly doing it. It would be a full-time job to keep looking through the regulations and keep updating them. I mean, your letter was really great. Nobody has brought up to us before, or at least not in my time on the commission. I've been on here for a long time, that our parking regulations were too strict. I mean, looking at how the other towns are doing it and looking at ours, and that they should be changed. Well, they should be, but we didn't necessarily know that before. You know, we do need the public to come to us and tell us that, you know what, maybe this needs to be changed. And as far as, you know, the accessory dwellings, you have to consider who's the accessory dwellings that are being built in Connecticut are not for rent. People are building them so when they have families and guests, they can stay there on their homes and on their estates. I mean, there are some in town and there are a few, but most of these properties, they're never going to rent anything. They don't need to rent them, and they have no intention. People who have these homes, they're building accessory dwellings for their friends.
Silence? Anybody want to do something?
Are there more public comments or concerns?
I think that Wes was maybe having some trouble with his technology. Wes, you back with us?
I am now back. Thank you. Thank you.
We were all looking to you there.
Oh, right. So is there anyone else in the audience that would like to be heard on this?
Karen, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat myself. I just think that there's a broader view and really looking at what are the concerns of planning and zoning and what they're trying to restrict out versus perhaps what the intent of this legislation is to increase affordable housing. So, you know, Donna, you're shaking your head. I don't think that this was intended so that wealthy people could build cottages on their property for their friends and family. That's not what this was intended for. And it ends up feeling like we're being dismissive to this issue and being exclusive and being or not being exclusive, not attending to what the issue is. And granted, I'm late to the party and I came to this from a variety of different sources. I do not have the depth of understanding and what all of the 42B 6A5 things are. But there, to me, there is this bigger issue about affordable housing. And
one of the things that the Federation of Planning and Zoning Agencies quarterly newsletter has said is that as of January 1st of 2022, zoning regulations must designate locations or zoning districts where accessory apartments are allowed. Zoning regulations must also permit, as of right, at least one accessory apartment on any single family lot, and the apartment cannot be required to be affordable housing. In addition, zoning regulations cannot impose setbacks, lot size, lot frontage, or lot coverage requirements greater than that required for a single family home. The limitations on local control also include landscaping, height, and architectural standards, none of which can exceed those that are required for a single family home. So they're basically what I consider to be, and what our attorney considers to be, a public act that's actually taking away the authority that the Planning and Zoning Commission has to regulate how their town is going to operate. And I think that is the crux of the matter. It's not the fact that we're only gonna, that we can only allow big houses. It doesn't have anything to do with that. I think it has to do with the fact that the state is now telling us, you can't do what you want to do. So they are removing our capabilities and our ability to actually plan and zone the way that we were set up to do when planning and zoning was created. So I
think
don't.
A good question to ask also is what in our regulations doesn't satisfy the need for housing in the town of Kent? I mean, is there something in our regulations that is exclusionary? And my position is that there's not, that the regulations they're inclusive, but they are inclusive within certain parameters, like the front yard setbacks, right? So we could have an accessory dwelling that's right up next to a primary dwelling in the center of town. That goes right to the side yard setback, and that's really different than what we had envisioned. That's we as a community, not just us as a planning and zoning commission, but we as a community have a vision for our town. So I think that's the question. Karen, you're on mute.
Lisa had her hand up also.
Hello, Lisa Wolak, and I think I'm unmuted now. Since I'm here and this is a public hearing, I just wanted to voice that I mimic what the commission seems to be leading towards opting out. I do feel like we should hold some regulatory authority and not let the state come in. There's always the chance to move forward as a commission in the future to loosen regulations, but once the state comes in and takes over, that's it. We don't have a say anymore. And I think I've only been in town a year, myself and my husband, so we're pretty new to town. However, we moved here for a reason. We love it here. We hope to be here for a very long time. And I would like to see control remain in town and not be held at the state level. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Lisa, thank you very much. That I think that does say what we're trying to say here. We're not trying to exclude. We're not trying to not listen. But we are the better arbiters of what happens in town rather than the state. So I think this is what opting out, that's what it means.
Wes, to your point, and to those of you who may misunderstand what opting out means, when the legislation was first passed, we had a very thorough and very interesting presentation from the legal community about what to do in a situation like this. It's new to the state and it's new to the towns. And it has nothing to do with disagreeing with with the state government. It has to do with being able to create within, in many cases, exactly what they're trying to accomplish, but adapt it to your own environment. So I'm kind of shocked ever since this happened. Every day I hope, oh gee, I hope we opted out of that. I hope we opted out of that. Not because it's bad legislation, but because it just doesn't fit. Now, I'm on the affordable housing committee for the state that we have to do, requires us. And Kent is going to go out of its way to meet all of those regulations, but we're doing it within the context of Kent. So I'm really sorry that the public is seeing P&Z as being rebellious to the state legislation, because that's just not the case. Would you all agree with me, other commissioners? I'm really shocked, to be perfectly honest, that I'm hearing these comments, because that's just not at all where I thought we were as a commission, that we're working harder and harder to do many of the things that the state's asking. But what happens in Hartford is not what's the best thing for Kent. And by that, I don't mean we don't want affordable housing. That just means how we create it within our town is very different than a place that puts up a 10-story high rise. So I'm sorry that the word opt out sounds like you disagree, because I do not think that's where we came from.
But Jean has her hand up.
Bill, just from a sort of data perspective, would it be possible to get like a 5-year look back of ADUs with the detail of square footage and I don't know what else, what other detail would be useful? It'd be interesting to me to see sort of the historical, like, where are we going with this concept of ADUs? Where have we come from in the last 5 years? So that would be something that I would be interested from a Board of Selectmen end of things to take a look at, because I am very much on the side of the pool here, just dipping my feet in. I would make that request if that's a possibility to get that sort of data, just simple spreadsheet kind of information.
And I guess one other comment I'll make, I assume many of you know, maybe not everyone, but the affordable housing plan, or the Kent housing plan that Alice and I are working on is finishing up its data collection, is now getting ready to start working on drafting. So there'll be more opportunities for public input into that, but a big part of that is thinking about housing and how we're going to manage our affordable housing goals. And that's something that will be completed sometime, hopefully in July, August, and will then end up with planning and zoning and the POCD for directing how we approach housing and trying to make more affordable housing available for Kent in general. So I think the fact that we have so many people committed to working on this is also a sign of the intent to address the housing challenges that we're seeing.
So moving on, does anyone else want to say something publicly here before we attempt to close the public hearing? So hearing none, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
I make that motion.
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Yeah. Okay, motion closed. Public hearing is closed at 9:30. So I guess now we have the resolution that Donna has drawn up. Resolve the Town of Kent Planning and Zoning Commission hereby opts out of the following provisions of section 6, subsection A through D, inclusive of Public Act 21-29, and 2, the provisions of subdivision 9 of some subsection D of section 8 through 2 of the general statutes as amended by the Public Act 21-29. Do we want to discuss this or make a motion and then discuss it?
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution that you just read, and that way we can have a discussion about it.
Do I hear a second to that?
I'll second the motion, Wes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karen.
Don't we need the amendments now before we can adopt this motion, this resolution? I can't vote on this because it talks about the proposed amendments. So now we actually need them.
We do. I think we need the amendment.
So unless they're ready, I don't know how we could actually meaningfully talk through this, technical or not. We need to be able to read them and understand them.
So say that again, David. I don't, so do you want the Public Act 21-29? Is that what you're?
No. Well, it says specifically in the commission's judgment, the proposed amendments satisfy the factors. I don't know what the proposed amendments are, so I can't have judgment.
So the amendments is the provision of section 6, opting out of that. That's how I read it.
This is from the Public Act.
These public acts are the ones that Mike Ziska spoke to us about. He went through all of them, and I know it was difficult because it was incredibly detailed, but he went through all these public acts with us and made his recommendation to us that we opt out of them.
And that presentation is in the file.
But I think the specific question is, Donna, the last paragraph, or the paragraph below the line, below number 2.
Yep. In adopting.
Right. So in adopting the above, the commission states on its record that in the commission's judgment, the proposed amendments satisfy the factors the commission must consider. So I think David's question is, what are the proposed amendments, and how do they satisfy the factors that we must consider? So are those amendments, are they a document that we will state on the record that we've reviewed and the amendments that we're going to make to the regulations, or are they something different?
I think that's verbiage that is kind of standard, and we need to change it because
right. I think that's right.
We're not doing what that says at all.
Right.
What we're talking about is opting out of these public acts stated in 1 and stated in 2. And in saying that, in the above, the commission states on the record that in the commission's effort, the proposed amendment, there isn't a proposed amendment. Or, they're public acts, so we need to change that or remove that.
Okay.
Paragraph.
Right. That was standard boilerplate that wasn't taken out. Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Which is, Justin is, he's watching the light bulb go off and wondering how we didn't recognize this. Anyway, so how would you change that? That last paragraph, would you simply say that upon review of PA 2129, that the commission has satisfied itself that has reviewed the I don't know, has reviewed all the pertinent information and is acting on the recommendation of their land use.
Can
attorney?
I, we need our lawyer to write this, don't we?
He wrote it.
He wrote this?
Yeah, I didn't make any of this up.
Then
So-
he's gonna have to explain that.
So what happens if we change the word amendment to resolution?
I think that's correct. The proposed resolution satisfies the factors.
Was considering reviewing such, in reviewing Public Act 2129. But I think that I think that it's reasonable, which is I think where David might be going is that we just make a couple of tweaks to this language and send it back to Mike and ask him to bless it, and then we can finalize the vote next meeting.
Is there, Donna, is there any timing reason that that would preclude us from sending it back to Mike to change the verbiage in the bottom paragraph?
No, because you have until January 1st of 2023, but I was hoping to get it done sooner rather than later, so that it's one less thing that at this point in time that we have to worry about. But, it's fine. You can table it if you want to until we get, legal clarification of what needs to be said.
Well, so I think that the verbiage is wrong, but maybe we can just change it. And what if it said, in adopting the above, the commission states on its record that in the commission's judgment, the proposed that in the commission's judgment that and upon consultation with the commission's attorney, that we should opt out of the Public Act and general statutes.
Or perhaps we should say it is within our rights to opt out.
Right.
So I just feel like I don't want to find that we said it wrong and then it doesn't apply. If it's not a gun to our head to get this done, I'd prefer just to make sure that the lawyer blesses it correctly, because it's obviously wrong now and I don't want to guess what's right. I would feel a little bit uncomfortable doing that personally.
I don't disagree. We have the time. Let's have Mike fix it.
Okay.
Donna, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that at all. We have the time. We can, Jean and the Board of Selectmen, that can come off of their agenda for March 17th. Because we're not meeting now again until April 14th, unless you want to have a special meeting just to do this. But, you guys are already meeting for affordable housing plans and for POCDs, but it would be at your pleasure. So
I don't think we have to have a special meeting. I mean, we've had the discussion. We just want Mike to fix the verbiage. So I think it can just go to the next meeting and we shouldn't have a huge discussion about it. We should be able to look at it, agree with the change that Mike makes to how it's written, and then we can accept it.
So can we get the motion withdrawn and then move to table it? I think there's a motion on
Yeah.
this.
yeah, I would withdraw the motion and then just provide a motion to table to the next regular meeting, or to continue to the next regular meeting.
Did I make the motion? Did somebody else?
Adam moved to accept it.
So then
Adam moved to accept the resolution as read by Wes.
So then I remove my motion to accept it, and I make a motion that we
We
table.
need a second, first to the withdraw.
Okay.
So Karen seconded the original motion. Karen, can you second the withdrawal?
I second the withdrawal of the motion. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, all in favor of accepting the withdrawal? Okay, motion approved.
And now I'll make a motion that we send this resolution as written back to our attorney, Mike Ziska, to edit the bottom paragraph and the verbiage in it, and we table it to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? Say aye to approve. Motion carried.
David,
Thank-
did you second that?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
Dave. Thanks, Donna.
No worries. Papers.
All right, so we are the 5-year plan, I guess that's 6B1. Review and approval of proposed 5-year capital plan. So it's my understanding that in reviewing these capital plans that what we do is to make sure that all of the line items go along with the POCD. We're not really commenting on dollar amounts, just that that we agree with what's being proposed.
Right. One of the things that at the last plan of conservation and development, Glenn had mentioned, remember, Matt, that there was a discussion about the cost in the chapter 7 or booklet 7. There was a discussion on the infrastructure, specifically the roads. And there was a chart in there that talked about the constant maintenance of a road actually is cheaper than not maintaining the road and having to fix it. And so, when he asked Rick, how do you handle this? Rick's response was, I do the best with what I get. So Glenn's recommendation is that when you guys review the 5-year capital plan, that there be kind of a comment that talks about how the upkeep of the roads should not be something that's used kind of as a sacrificial lamb when money needs to be taken out of the capital plan. Because in actuality, constant maintenance is actually cheaper than repair. Am I misrepresenting that, Matt?
Not at all. That's what he said. And because the question very specifically was, are we giving Rick enough? Are we giving the Department of Public Works enough resources, the resources that they need to maintain the public roadways? And that's when Rick said he does best with what he has. So no, you're right.
So I think if you talk about approving the 5-year capital plan, one of the things that you should actually throw in the approval is the fact that this capital plan has still not been approved by the Board of Finance. Usually, when I first started doing this, we were getting it last, and it had already been approved by the Board of Finance. So this hasn't been, and it's always been my recommendation that you guys approve it with the condition that if there are changes to the capital plan, that it should be resubmitted back to planning and zoning, or at least planning and zoning should be advised of any of those changes. And that, and then to talk about the actual DPW 5-year capital plan and the importance of maintaining on what's been requested.
So what you're saying is, Donna, that we could approve this contingent upon Board of Finance's approval. only.
Well, I mean, it's not that we're approving the capital plan. Basically, what we're looking at is what's
Yeah.
going to be done and whether or not it falls within the plan of conservation and development. So, but in some cases, the capital plan can be changed by the Board of Finance. And so you guys might want to know about that, because one of those changes might be to the DPW, is basically all I'm saying.
I understand what you're saying. I guess I have a hard time with this because we have no idea whether these numbers represent what Rick needs or what Rick wants, what he needs to get his job done and what he would like to have to get his job done. I have no idea. I don't know where these numbers came from. I assume that they come from Rick. I'm assuming that he, but I don't know. I don't know if he came up and he said, look, we need this much money in this year and we need this much money in 2025 and in 2027 to fix this bridge and that road, and this equipment is going to need to be replaced.
Well, I'm not sure that that's our responsibility.
It's not.
I don't think it is.
It's not.
I thought
It's
we're just
not.
supposed to look at the projects that are being proposed and make sure that they're doing things that we believe are in line with the plan. So yes, we're putting roads in that make sense, and we're fixing parks that make sense, and they're not putting a giant cement plant in the middle of town or anything. So,
But we're not looking at any of that, David.
isn't that exactly what we're looking at? Is the specific projects
It-
here?
It's a DPW, just for example, bridges. We don't know which bridges and what projects.
Well, that's on page 2.
Buildings and improvements. There's money to improve some of the buildings. $35,000 in equipment, which must be maintenance, I assume, because you're not buying a piece of equipment for $35,000. The
But if
fleet,
you look at
It's
the
a
third
tractor.
page, if you look at the back page of that, it actually gives you the DPW capital detail.
okay.
So that information is there. So it's not that you are approving any of the projects that he's working on. It's just that it was Glenn's recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission stress the fact that proper importance should be given to the road projects that are being done based on booklet number 7 regarding infrastructure. I mean, that's really what it is. And that
that the scope is right. So, it's scope versus cost, right? So we're not talking about cost, we're talking about scope. Does this scope fall within what we believe the current POCD says,
and Jean has her hand up.
right?
Jean?
Yeah, just to fill a gap that may be out there. So Rick is the person who's responsible for putting all of those capital projects for submitting them for the capital plan for consideration. So the department head is the person who is responsible for the submissions of those plans. So Rick has a bigger plan, and he plugs things into the capital for DPW as part of his larger plan of maintaining roads and replacing bridges, and what funding is going to be coming in from the feds or from the state. And so it's done by the department head.
So I guess specific questions I would have based on, I know some of the things that have come up with planning and conservation is kind of if there's things that the plan talks about with respect to improving traffic flow options for town. I know that's come up in meetings here as well. I see there's money for parks and recreation. I don't know what the PODC says about if we need to take a second look at either enhancing or otherwise changing things with respect to that. But I guess I would have questions there specific to, should we be saying we want to see more or less? I don't think anything specific to the fire department falls really in our, would be in our purview, but I guess DPW and Parks and Rec would seem to be the things we should be comparing, so to speak. I also admit to having a tremendous sense of deja vu about this conversation about 2 years ago.
That's right.
Okay.
I did.
It's not just me.
It's not just deja vu.
Okay.
It's real.
It's real.
So I think I think when we talked about this, it was, last year, we had Rick come to a meeting, the last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, where I somewhat objected to approving this. And then,
Yeah.
and then we asked Rick to come, and Rick was there the year before, and then Rick came last year. I think that's helpful when Rick talks to us about, which roads he thinks that need to be repaired and maintained.
But is repair and maintaining really planning? I mean, shouldn't we think about capital projects that are really fundamentally changing some of the structure of the town, like things that we realize we have to deal with over the next 10 years? Like if Route 7 continues to get busier and busier, at some point it becomes a detriment to the businesses and the people who live here. Like, is there something in here about, hey, we're gonna do something, we're gonna fund a study, we're gonna figure out if there's another road bypass that needs to go in there? Is like something gonna happen with the road at the end of Town Hall? Where's the planning aspect of understanding like what some of this stuff is over the next 5 or 10 years? So I would assume we should be thinking about it.
I think that's in the plan of conservation and development. And I don't think that, certainly the Maple Street extension, the road between Maple Street extension, that wouldn't be here.
But why not? I mean, if that's something that we think eventually should be done, wouldn't it start to appear by, the end of the 5-year plan? Or is that mean it's more than 5 years out, so we're not thinking about it?
It's private land. So we can't really earmark, Rick's not going to earmark funds to build a road.
Understood. But I
It's
guess
not
then
even an option right now. It's not even we can think of it as something that maybe this commission thinks that it would be good at some point, but it's not even. How do we consider something that the town doesn't own, the land is private, and it's not for sale right now?
It can.
And with regard to Route 7, Route 7 is state, so we really don't have anything to do with that. I mean, we've got the Streetscape Committee using, which I think they're state funds, to, we're talking about, state funds on a state highway. So those kind of things wouldn't show up here either. So I think those are purely planning. They're planning ideas.
Do things like, more charging infrastructure show up in here? Are there other things that the planning, the POCD as it exists now, we would expect to see funding starting to appear in here? I guess it doesn't really feel like planning and zoning should be signing off on which bridge should be getting fixed. Like that's driven by which bridge is breaking, not by what we're planning on. So it really, I guess I'd be looking for capital projects that involve something specific to changing the town or driving a plan within the town, whether it's a study or something else. Otherwise, a lot of the budget is just, we sign off on it because it's got to get done.
But I think that gets back to Donna's original comment from Glenn's recommendation that we're not waiting to repair a bridge because it's falling down, that we're making sure we understand the state of our infrastructure and maintaining, as opposed to replacing.
Which is good financial stewardship, and obviously planning and zoning should support it, but it's like secondary to our mission to a certain extent.
I maybe secondary to our mission here, but certainly not secondary to our mission with the plan of conservation and development, right? That's sort of fits right in there. And I know the plan of conservation and development is as Wes has said, it's our planning function, whereas this sort of falls out of our planning function.
This does? This feels like it is our planning function. It's not our zoning function.
Yeah, I misspoke. It falls out of the plan of conservation and development, not the planning function. So the
Okay.
POCD is a planning function, and then this falls out of our POCD.
Okay.
So one thing I guess that we should ask Don about is the numbers that that are pushed out beyond the 5-year capital plan for the Planning and Zoning Commission for the POCD. The numbers that we have there. So we have a rewrite of zoning regulations. It looks like we have money put out for 2029 and 2030. And money for the POCD going out to 2031 because we're doing it now.
That's the next one.
And are these, and maybe we don't have to really talk about these because these are further out than the 5-year plan, but I mean, these are numbers that are directly relate to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
It's also important to understand that what we're talking about right now is the Planning and Zoning Commission approval per the statute 8-24, which are municipal improvements. You know, that the budget that you're looking at, Adam, for land use, that's the budget that we gave that
Right.
this commission forwarded onto the Board of Selectmen to put into the budget for review for Board of Finance. So it's really just this. We've got this responsibility per state statute to approve the municipal improvements, to approve the scope of the municipal improvements, not the cost of them.
So I guess I do have one specific question. Maybe Gene can answer this with respect to DPW. We know that we're starting to see more intense rain and other events. And I guess my question specific to that budget would be, has this been adjusted at all to take into account that we seem to be seeing more extreme weather on a regular basis? That I think is in line with the planning function. And again, maybe Rick could answer that if Gene can't, but.
Yeah, that would be a Rick question for sure.
Okay.
So I know that that the chair of the Board of Finance, who we saw just earlier, is looking for this by the 17th of this month. So I don't know that we I don't know we can wait for another 30 days.
No, I think we have to approve it. I think that it's somewhat, it's given to us to look at it. Do we see anything wrong with it? If we don't see anything wrong with it, then the assumption is that it is covering the necessary maintenance and repairs going forward. There's nothing that's glaring, in which case we approve it. Because we're not approving specific projects. We're looking at it to see an overview of what's going on. You know, we want roads to be maintained. We want bridges to be repaired. That's what we see in here. It's not for us to decide how much money is on any given line or how much money is put into any given area. It's to see that this looks like it's covering what it's supposed to, as far as we can tell.
So is that a motion, Adam?
That's a motion.
All right.
I will second that long motion.
All right.
We approve it.
And, just to put everybody somewhat at ease, having listened to Rick propose, present present the DPW budget and the capital plan to the Board of Selectmen, I think we're really lucky to have such a engaged head of the Department of Public Works in Rick, who knows the state. I mean, he really understands our system of roads and bridges, and he knows what needs to be done. And so, to have him is really a blessing. So
You're here. Yeah.
He does do a great job. and he's make sure our town stays in good shape.
He is tuned into
Right.
every blade of grass.
Absolutely. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion is passed.
So I would say, Wes, just to, jump on you one last time.
That's all right. Please
Let's
do.
let's have Rick come to this meeting next year,
Okay,
if he doesn't mind.
sure, sure. I think it might make it move quicker. That's good.
Okay.
I'm gonna put that in the minutes so that you guys remember.
All right.
Absolutely.
Hey. Staff report, we're at 2, right?
Yep.
I don't really have anything except, with the exception of, I received a letter from the town of Dover regarding a public hearing for a proposed local law number 1 of 2022, imposing a temporary townwide moratorium on the approval and installation of commercial purposed non-farm rooftop freestanding ground-mounted and solar farm energy systems.
Damn.
So I guess they must have gotten a couple of inquiries about setting up solar farms. And so they're doing a moratorium, which is pretty interesting considering it's a neighboring town.
Yeah.
No, just thought
Is
I'd.
Cricket Valley in Dover?
I'm sorry?
Is Cricket Valley in Dover, in the town of Dover?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's, yeah, there's been some hullabaloo with regard to the solar arrays that are happening.
Across the
around
street from
that.
it.
Right,
Right,
exactly.
isn't, it's across the street from Cricket Valley. So, yeah. But anyway, just as an FYI for you guys, there's no action that you need to take. I just thought it would be interesting to bring forward. And I don't, we talked about Massachusetts, right? And Airbnb last
Yeah,
time.
we did. Yeah, we did.
Okay. I got nothing else. I'm done.
Matt, POCD?
Yeah, okay, really quickly, we had a meeting, when was it? It was, I was standing up, so it was sometime mid-February, February 15th, maybe?
It was actually the day you had your surgery, which was what, the 10th of February or something?
That was this meeting. I think I was standing up by the time we saw it. But anyway, we had a meeting in mid-February. And we were talking about having a, trying to set up a public meeting, and we agreed that that was premature, that Glenn would, we've been putting together these booklets, which don't necessarily equate to how the POCD is going to be laid out. It's really just carved it into different talking points, different review topics. So he's going to get that more into a format that the POCD rewrite might fit into. And then he's going to present it to us as a group. So whether that's we take an hour out of our, or half an hour, probably an hour out of a regular meeting, or whether we get together for a special meeting with this group just to run through where we are and what we're thinking about how the POCD is going to be laid out and some of the broad topics that are in it. After which we think we're going to want to go to a public, to some kind of a public forum, not a
Great.
public hearing, but a public meeting where we can present what we've got, talk about which direction we're going. After this commission believes that's where we're going in the right direction, we go out to the public, we get their input, and then we get to somewhat of a final draft. So I think that's coming up within 60 days from now, maybe, that Glenn thought he might be ready.
That's great.
Yeah, and then it was just, he was waiting for census information, which he's hoping is going to be out in time, like in May. He was waiting for that. And there was one other thing that he was waiting for so that he could do. I think there's booklet number 2, he's still waiting for information on. And he hopes to get that and merge them all together.
Yeah, and we're hoping to have, we don't think we can go forward without the housing plan, the information from there that we don't want to incorporate in the POCD, and some of the information that the
sustainability team is putting together. So we want some feedback from them. So yeah, we're probably not talking about having anything, sort of firm for final review until the fall, but we wanted to be cognizant of Donna's time, and we want to be done by the time that she's ready.
Yeah, final by September.
Final by September.
That's a challenge.
Yeah,
Thanks,
okay.
Matt. So David, affordable housing?
I will segue right into it. So we had our first public meeting. We kind of presented the structure of the plan. It was pretty well attended. We had like 50 some odd people. Gene, do you remember how many actually showed up? Something like that. A lot of useful information from the surveys, which we've been incorporating, a lot of interesting comments. So we were kind of finished with the data collection part. I think we're still getting the rest of the employer surveys in as well. I'm sorry, employee surveys in. In our next meeting, I guess we're gonna start digging into actually writing it. Jocelyn's got that underway, and we're still aiming to have it completed July, August, hopefully sooner. But I think we'll probably end up being a month later than the date right now, just so we have enough time to finish everything off and then have the necessary public meeting before it comes to planning and zoning.
Good, thanks, David.
You bet.
So administrative permits, any comments on those? Okay. Donna, do we have anything in executive session?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so if my computer should crap out, Adam, would you close it out?
I will.
I'm not going to wake Nancy up to reset this thing. Thanks for bearing with me here.
Okay, so
the cat.
everybody that's either here, I can put back into the waiting room, or they can actually leave
Pack up
as
my
we
stuff
go into.
and go home. Good night, everybody. Thanks for the great conversation.
Good night.
Number 9.
That's it, right? Okay, so I am going to, I just need a motion to go into executive session.
Made.
So moved and seconded.
Adam,
Approved.
David. That's at 10:08, and I'm going to stop or pause. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay. So I out of executive session at 10:31. And we need motions. And I actually just copy it from month to month. And I always use Adam and David. We can switch that up if you want.
We did it.
You guys are good.
You know,
Already done. Moved and
right.
closed.
Right, just to say, to follow the recommendations of the attorney and have Donna Hayes report back to the commission as this matter progresses. Mr. Birnbaum seconded and the motion carried unanimously. And I've done that for agenda items number 13, 14, and 15. And all I need now is a motion to adjourn.
Motion to close.
Donna, you're the best.
Thank you, Wes. And
No,
who
no.
seconded
I
that?
second.
Oh, Adam, why am I not
David.
surprised?
All right. Good night, everybody.
Okay,
night,
good night.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Bye.
Um,